What is up? Alright, so... do that. What is up? Alright, so... nailed it. Maybe not. Do that. There we go. Alright, maybe so not. First stream here on YouTube, obviously, so it'll take me a minute to get familiarized and all that. There we go. But this is it. Right. This is the long promised here on YouTube, obviously. So political stream and all that here on YouTube that I've been talking about on other get familiarized platforms. So tonight I want to take a look at Dan Cox. Political stream and all that here on YouTube that Maryland Gubernatorial platforms. Debate. So tonight I want to take a look at Dan Cox. And so I'm more concerned Maryland Gubernatorial with getting into Dan Cox and his policies and all that because so I'm more concerned with getting into Dan Cox and his policies and all that because I'll be looking at Wes more as well, and I have more of a dog in terms of I think he more of a dog in the fight with. Dan Cox. There's a lot of will be Republicans that I grew up with that would vote for Dan right now as well, and I have more of a dog in terms of more of a dog in the fight. A little bit about me. I grew up with Dan Cox. There's a lot of really Republican. I grew up knowing Dan Republicans that I grew up with that would vote for Dan right now. My dad worked with his dad and him. A little bit about me. I literally really Republican. I grew up knowing Dan as long as I can remember. My dad worked with his dad. We can get into some of like what happened between me and him, and like I got blocked on his socials from as long as I can remember. A few years ago, and we no longer have really any relationship, so to speak. But we did at one time. We can get into some of like what happened between me and him. I admired him at some point, and I got blocked. His politics has a few years ago left, and we no longer have really any relationships that happened. But we did at one time, and I admired him at some point, and my politics has shifted left and left. And as that happened, if you will, so I can get into that more as it goes or whatnot. Some people right now are not tolerant of. Take a look at this debate. So I can get into that more as it goes or whatnot. Right now I just want to. I've got to put a look at this debate. Hi, Jason. The top two contenders for Maryland governor. This is a joint production of Maryland and WBAL TV 11. We also like to acknowledge those of you watching on NBC in Washington and listening on WBAL News Radio here in Baltimore. I'll be your moderator. Hi, Jason. We'll keep things on track as we explore key issues on the minds of Maryland voters. We'll get to our candidates in just a moment. First, I'd like to introduce you to our inquisitive panel of journalists, starting with reporter Pamela Wood. All right, we can skip like the panelists and stuff, right? Like I don't care about this. Nominee for governor and Wes Moore, the Democratic nominee, as selected by Maryland voters. Dan Cox and Wes Moore. We'd like to offer each of our candidates the opportunity to make an opening statement, and we've used. Okay. All right, we can skip like the panelists and stuff, right? Like I don't care about this. We'll go first. We could have done the old coin flip, but this is way more fun. So, Mr. Moore, it is more fun. Dan Cox and Wes Moore. But you want the chance to begin with you. I appreciate that. Good evening. Hi, Wes. Maryland's we have amazing people and incredible potential, but not everybody's in a position to succeed. And I understand that. I was raised by an immigrant single mom after my dad died. I joined the Army and learned a basic principle: leave no one behind. And as your governor, that will be the new mission for the state of Maryland. Now, I understand you're concerned about paying groceries and bills, but we can build an economy that works for everyone. I understand that you're worried about safety in your own communities, but we can work with communities and law enforcement to ensure public safety. And I know you're concerned about your rights being stripped away. Maryland can be a state that protects abortion rights and abortion access. My name is Wes Moore. I'm a combat veteran, a small business owner, a third-generation Marylander, and I'd be honored to have your support, Maryland. Mr. Cox.
Well, hello, Maryland. Hello, Maryland. It's an honor to be here to represent your interests. I am a husband, my precious bride of 26 years, my lovely family of 10 children. We are serving you, and in the State House, I've served for many years in working as a small businessman. I grew up on a farm.
Okay. I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I realize I'm a little fast.
House, I've served for many years.
Sorry. Let me
working as a...
Let me back up and go again.
And in the State House, I've served. Love to be here to represent your interests. I am a husband.
We got West
Maryland. Hello, Maryland. It's an honor to be here to represent your interests. I am a husband, my precious bride of 26 years, my lovely family of 10 children. We are serving you, and in the State House, I've served for many years in working as a small businessman. I grew up on a farm, and I had to work my way through college. I understand and I feel the pain of putting food on the table that so many Marylanders are feeling right now. And that is why in the legislature I stood with Governor Hogan to ensure that our streets were safe and that our taxes were lower. I was on the governor's crime accountability board. I was on the task force. And additionally, I have worked for parental rights to make sure that our children are safe and that the options are there for them. But my opponent, he has sought to defund the police. He has sought from this, the entire campaign trail has sought to centralize education. I intend to put power back in the people's hands, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you.
So that's opening statements. And I'll say this just to be fair. West had a fine opening statement. I don't think it was, like, amazing. Okay. So that's opening statements. And I'll say this just to be fair.
It was fun.
West had a fine opening statement. I don't think it was, like... And I felt Dan Cox's was literally all over the place. Like, what the hell was he saying at half of that time? But it was fine.
Sorry,
like, it didn't... It was fine for an opening statement. And I felt Dan Cox's was literally all over the place. Like, what the hell was he saying at half of that time? Like... Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm... trying to see something here. I would like to see... No, go back the other way. No, go back the other way. Yeah, so I don't think, like, Wes had this fantastic opening statement, but at least his was coherent, right? Like, yeah, so I don't think, like, Wes had this fantastic opening statement, but at least his was coherent, right? Like, Let me see if I can find this. I should have done this beforehand, but I'm just kidding. Let me see if I can find this. I should have done this beforehand, but I'm just kidding. No, I would like to know this house. No, I would like to know. Alright, well, screw that. That's fine. This house. Anyway. Well, that's fine. Whatever. Yeah, I felt like Dan's opening statement there was completely incoherent. Alright, well, screw that. That's fine. What is he even saying there? Anyway. It literally says, well, that's fine. Whatever.
Be honored to have this.
Yeah, I felt like Dan's opening statement there was completely
Hello, Maryland.
incoherent.
Hello, Maryland. It's an honor to be here to represent your interests. I am a husband, my precious bride of 26
I am a
years,
husband.
my lovely family of 10 children. We are serving you, and in the State House,
we are serving you, and in the State House,
served for many years.
many years. Okay.
working as a small businessman. I've worked, grew up on a farm, and I had to work my way through college. I understand, and I
I am a husband.
feel the pain of putting food on the table that so many Marylanders are feeling right now.
We are serving you, and
that
in
is
the
why
State
in the
House.
legislature, I stood with Governor Hogan
Served for many
to
years,
ensure that
okay.
our streets were safe and that our taxes were lower. I was on the governor's
Hogan hates him.
Crime Accountability Board. I was
Okay.
on the task force. And additionally, I have worked for parental rights to make sure that our children are safe and that the options are there for them. But my opponent, he has sought to defund the police. He has sought from this, the entire campaign trail has sought to centralize education.
Hogan hates him.
I intend to put power back in the people's hands, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Gentlemen, thank you. Our first question is coming from Pamela Wood with the Baltimore Banner.
Thank you. This question goes first to Delegate Cox. You have a history of promoting distrust in elections. You've claimed the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. You worked as a lawyer on his behalf in Pennsylvania, and you co-hosted buses to Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 for his Stop the Steal rally. And here in Maryland, you just fought unsuccessfully a legal battle over how some of the ballots will be counted. Do you trust that Maryland's election system is accurate? And should Marylanders believe that you will honor and accept the election results?
Absolutely, I believe in our constitutional system, and as a constitutional civil rights attorney, that is exactly what I've been working to do in the legislature. That is exactly what I have pledged
No
to
answer
do
to the
as
question.
next governor, to ensure that really democracy is at stake, right? We have a republic. That means the constitutional procedures must be followed. That's all I've ever sought to do, and that's exactly what I intend to continue to do.
And so just to follow up, I asked if you would accept the results of the election and believe that there's integrity.
No
way
answer to
that
the
election is being
question.
carried out this fall, do you believe that will be accurate, and will you accept the results?
Well, I have always accepted election results that are fair and that are following the Constitution. I intend to look to the Constitution and uphold the law and the Constitution. At this point,
That's a lot of Constitution.
Saying that before a surgery takes place, to find out whether or not, to decide whether or not the surgery went well. That is why the statute of Maryland actually protects Democrats, Republicans alike, to say there's a process that has to be followed, and every single candidate on the ballot has a right to that process, and I intend to uphold that process.
That's a lot of Constitution.
Now, you have stated that you will honor the results of the election. Given the statements and actions of your opponent, it's possible that a meaningful
real
number
quick
of
here.
Maryland...
Real quick white here. Because Dan Cox has recently tried to walk back this whole, and he never answered the question really. But he's tried to walk
real
back
quick here.
his whole. Real quick white here. Because Dan Cox has recently tried to walk election back this whole, and he never answered the question really.
He actually was at,
but he's tried to walk back his
later
whole,
on. He was at Morgan
University in Baltimore at their debate thing that Westmore didn't come to.
election denying
but he fielded questions,
right.
and one of them was very
He actually
direct.
was at.
It was
there's something. Will you?
it'll come later on. He was
or-
at
or,
Morgan
it was, did
University in Baltimore at their
organized buses to
debate thing that
January 6th.
Westmore didn't come to. But he fielded
riots,
questions,
and
one of
the
them
riot
was very
in
DC,
direct,
and he said,
it was,
"No, that's like a
will you
miscommunication thing.
it
Like
was,
it's
did
been
you,
misreported." And in an interview,
organized buses
with
to
a
January
local
6th.
Baltimore
news station. He
riot
also
and or the riot in DC,
which I
and
think it
he
was the
said,
same-
no, that's like a
it wasn't the same station that
miscommunication thing.
But anyway,
like it's been misreported.
he was asked point blank
and
about that
in an
of,
interview. You did
with,
this, right? And he was like,
local
no, I
Baltimore,
didn't. News station.
I
He
went
also
with
my
which I think it was the
with
same
my kids, with 7 kids, my 7 kids, and like,
the same station that I watched.
but
anyway,
it was a local celebrity, so I guess
he was
my
asked
name
point
that
blank
hooked in
about
there,
that of,
but
like,
I had nothing to do with it.
you did this,
And,
right?
and
he
no,
deleted
I
his
didn't.
tweet.
I
went
I can pull
with
up real quick my with my
I
kids, with 7
should
kids, my 7 kids, and like
Yeah,
he deleted this tweet. I was a
here.
local celebrity, so I guess my name that hooked in there, but I had
I
nothing
am
to do
co-hosting
with it.
2 buses to
And,
the Million
and he
MAGA
deleted
March
his tweet
/ rally
with the
I can
Frederick
pull
County
up real
Conservative Club
quick.
in support of President Trump
already
at Real
should
Donald Trump
have-
on January 6th, 2001.
he
to
deleted
hashtag
this
Stop
tweet
Steal.
right here.
Demand no hashtag China Biden. No
I
hashtag
am co-hosting
CCP,
2 buses to the
hashtag
Million
fraud.
MAGA
At,
March
fraud.
/ rally
At Mike Pence.
with
Join
the
us
Frederick
County
here.
Conservative Club in support of President Trump.
I am
at Real
co-hosting
Donald Trump on
2
January
buses.
6th, 2001. To hashtag Stop the
He
Steal.
deleted this tweet,
Demand
and
no
he's recently,
hashtag China
you know,
Biden. No
distanced
hashtag
himself from
CCP.
it. Hashtag fraud.
He
Prided
fraud.
himself
At
on
Mike
being
Pence. Join
a
us
lawyer who was
here.
involved in the
I
am co-hosting 2 buses.
ballot.
He's deleted his tweet and
watching
he's
in
recently,
Pennsylvania.
he's called for a forensic
from it.
he
Election
prided
investigation,
himself on
here in
being
Maryland,
a
which is
lawyer who was
ridiculous
involved
considering
in the no way
Maryland would ever
not
Joe
ballot
Biden in an election
watching in
versus
Pennsylvania.
Trump.
He's called for a forensic
Hilarious that he's like, we need a
election
forensic
investigation
here in Maryland,
was stolen.
which is ridiculous considering there's
So he's completely
no way
disingenuous.
Maryland would ever answer there about not Joe Biden in an election
being
versus
concerned
Trump. It's hilarious that he's like, we need a forensic
about
investigation.
certification.
was stolen.
He's lying through his teeth when he says, like, so he's completely disingenuous on his whole answer there about being concerned of, and he can try to walk back his whole about the election. I accepted the results. Certification. He's lying through his teeth when he says, like, yeah, I'll accept the results. I don't think he
the results of the election. What more do you believe
that
could
is true.
be done
He
to
didn't
ensure
before,
election integrity?
and he can
and
try to
faith in the
walk
results of the
back
election?
his whole.
I want to read something. I am
I
co-hosting
accepted
2
the
buses
results.
There you go.
to
How
the
he
Million
wants,
MAGA
but he didn't.
March/rally with the Frederick County Conservative Club in support of @RealDonaldTrump on January 6th,
That is true.
2021 to #StopTheSteal. Demand no #China Biden.
There you go.
Those are the words of my opponent. And so to Marylanders, I say this. We have free, fair, and transparent elections in our state. Never has the question of election integrity
Westmore came
come
with
up in the
receipts.
state of Maryland, and they will not come up in 2022. We are proud of the election process that we have here in the state of Maryland. And I will honor the results of the election, and I'm hoping that my opponent would do the same.
Thank you, but
Westmore
to my
came with
question,
receipts.
What more could be done to ensure public trust in the election results? Do you have any proposals?
Well, I think public trust in the election system is there. You know, we have an election system where we offer mail-in ballots. We have an election system where we offer early voting. We have an election system where we offer day of, and we have a court system that reinforces the fact that early ballots should be counted prior. We have a remarkably transparent election system in our state, and one that is irresponsible and frankly dangerous to continue to cast doubt in the election system of Maryland.
There you go.
Thank you.
Our
That's-
next question tonight.
That's exactly like. The answer isn't how to build trust in the election system. It's stop undermining it. Like, you realize that's been the Donald Trump Dan Cox playbook is undermining exactly a free and fair election. The answer isn't how to build trust in the election.
You don't need to build trust in
system.
something that's worked.
It's
working.
Stop
and there's no evidence
undermining it.
of widespread fraud.
You realize that's been the Donald Trump Dan Cox playbook is undermining a free and fair election.
The
10
other
seconds.
thing that's dangerous is a candidate
Not
such as my
building
opponent,
trust.
who
You don't
wishes
need
to
to build
centralize
trust in something
authority
that's worked
and
is working,
completely
and
ignore
there's
the
no
Constitution
evidence
and the state law.
of widespread
That is what
fraud.
I have been seeking to do, is uphold the state law for everyone, and that's exemplified even in my own county, where a Democrat candidate
10 seconds.
won election by one vote, and then the certification process was then denied. Just this last month, in July, excuse me, because of the fact that there
Wait,
was
was
a
it last
a
month or
question
July?
as to the counting. That's the right of every single candidate on the ballot. That's the statute, that's the law, and I've worked across the aisle to ensure that all of our elections have integrity. I have stood with ACLU attorneys to make sure one person, one
All right.
vote. And
Wait, was it last month or July?
He's saying I have demanded that our elections have integrity. Investigations have shown again and again that the 2020 presidential election was a valid election. He's saying
that there was integrity.
Have demanded that our elections have
and
integrity. When asked point blank, investigations
Again,
have
twice
shown again and again
about
if
the
Donald
2020
Trump, if the
presidential election
was stolen
was
from Donald Trump, a valid election.
Dan Cox
That there was
has
integrity.
said,
Yes,
in the
I
vote
do
believe
counting.
it's stolen.
And
I believe I've
when
seen evidence
asked
of it being
point
stolen.
blank, again,
Citation
twice
needed
about
but
if Donald Trump,
bullshit
if the election
that he
was stolen
upholds
from Donald
Trump.
I intend to uphold the law as we go forward.
Dan Cox
if I can just
has
undermined
yes,
election law.
That's what you mean. I believe I've seen evidence of it.
So, Mr. Moore, this question is for you. We wanted to discuss why
citation
you only
needed,
agreed to one
but
in-person debate.
bullshit
Dan Cox
that
appeared at
he
Morgan State University's
upholds.
forum that you declined.
That's the
The
university,
student paper from
Morgan State,
said
that
it's unfortunate that Westmore did not accept
undermine
numerous
election law.
invitations
That's what I do wish
to the
that
forum. Dan Cox
he had
has
gone.
accused you of running from him. Cox handily won his party's nomination.
Because
How do you
Cox can
respond
say that.
to Marylanders who feel that you are snubbing their
That's the
nominee?
university,
I
Morgan
respond
State.
by saying that I'm excited to be here right now, today.
I do wish
Dan
that
Cox.
he had gone.
I respond by saying that we
Okay.
have spent time going all over
Because
the state
Cox
of
can
Maryland,
say
going to
that.
all 24 jurisdictions, meeting voters where they are. That we have spent time and will spend time on all 4 HBCUs in the state of Maryland because they're going to be incredibly important
but Dan Cox has
to
been
the
doing the same
long-term
thing.
vitality of our state.
Okay.
And truthfully, I'm excited to spend time with voters, talking about the issues that they care about. And while I'm eager to have this debate with my opponent, the fact that even
but Dan
Governor
Cox has been doing the same thing.
said he will not support his candidacy and called him unfit to lead. I think should be a clear indication to voters as to why I want to spend my time talking to voters instead of just on the debate stage constantly.
And Mr.
Fair,
Cox, if
but
you
I still
were
think you
to
need
lose
to-
this election,
you
would
needed
you be
to-
a bridge builder? Would you work to support the Moore administration?
Well, absolutely. We need to be team players, and I would begin by saying that the fact that I have stood with Governor Hogan
Fair,
indicates that
but
I am the
I
only
still think you
individual
need to-
running for governor.
you needed to-
with experience, with the opportunity, who has served in government, and who has stood with Governor Hogan's policies to lower taxes, lower crime, while my opponent instead has sought to, on Salon.com, has proclaimed that he wants to defund the police. This is the difference between us. It's a stark difference. And when you look at the reason he won't debate, it's because he's a...
Okay, hold on. Salon.com. He wants to defund the police. Real quick. Pulled it up. Interview with Salon.com. This was June 26th. Salon.com. Right after George Floyd. To defund the police. Let's get into... Real quick. Pulled it up. Interview with... the first question is about... Salon.com. This was June 26th, 2020. What is on for all this to come when George Floyd? We got a president who takes the joke. Let's get into... with that and acknowledging that many of these systems have problems, there's been a lot of talk about defunding police and trying to relocate some of those, reallocate what is on for all this to come into places that will be beneficial for communities of color. Where do you stand on that? It's interesting because I want people to understand the reason why these conversations are even happening. With that and acknowledging that many of these systems have problems, police station, there's been a lot of talk about defunding police and trying to relocate some of those, reallocate some of those funds into places that will be beneficial for communities of color. Where do you stand on that? It's interesting because I want people to understand the reason why these conversations are even happening. Municipal budgets, and you can do it personal budgets, the police station. What you spend money on as well. If you're looking at budget, what budgets fundamentally are, is their moral documents, what matters to you, what do you spend time on, and what do you turn around and fund. We were having a conversation. I was actually talking with the folks from LPS, personal budgets. We were having a conversation where I was like, I'm very much aligned with what you're saying. It was like, I don't want to abolish the force because I think there's a necessity for having it. But I do think that we put far too much weight and far too much pressure. We were having a conversation. I was actually talking with the folks from LPS in a way that's incredibly. We were having a conversation where I was like, I'm very much aligned with what you're saying. That was like, I don't want to abolish the force, and we expand the definition of policing in a way that's incredibly dangerous. But I do think that we put far too much weight. Do I think this excessive militarization that we have for policing in a way that's incredibly or helpful or cost communities? Absolutely. But do I think? I want to make sure far too much weight, far too much that is committed to doing things like abolishing in a way incredibly dangerous and abolishing racial profiling and abolishing all the other aspects this excessive that it sounds we're in the process of doing now. Is useful, no knock warrants and all this kind of stuff that should have never been in place in the first place. I want to make sure that actually means taking an internal look at the entire system, abolishing police brutality, being able to do a true self-audit, racial profiling, and abolishing all the other aspects that it sounds we're in the process of doing now. Defunding mixed up with and all this kind of stuff that should have never been in place in the first place. Yeah. So that actually means taking an internal look at the entire system.
There you
being able
go.
to do a true self-audit. He does not say he wants to defund the police.
I think people are getting defunding mixed up with the
He's literally saying we need police reform, and there you go.
There are so many things in this book that are completely false.
There you
go. Was raised in Baltimore City.
He does not say
you weren't there until you were 34.
he wants to defund the police or abolish the police.
Thank you. I mean,
he's literally saying we need police reform, and there you go.
Governor Hogan called you unfit to lead.
Agreed.
We're watching a perfect indication as to why Governor
I'm not
Hogan
even
has
gonna
said,
touch
not
that.
only will I not support Delegate Cox, I won't even give him a tour of the governor's office. Frankly, I'm standing on stage right now with an extremist election denier whose rhetoric and whose policies are not just dangerous and divisive, but will take our state backwards. And the intention that I have in this campaign is I have an intention that we're going to talk about the issues that Marylanders care about, like ensuring we have a 21st century education system for all of our children, ensuring that we can keep our neighborhoods safe, ensuring that we can have an economy that grows and can benefit everybody, instead of delving into conspiracy theories that my opponent continues to throw out.
I think that's preposterous. I need to respond. This is outrageous and ridiculous. We are bigger than
they're just preposterous and outrageous.
We have to get about the business of the state, and I have had lunch with the governor. I have toured the State House, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I've been working in Annapolis for 4 years for the people of Maryland. I have been elected to do that, and I am running.
You've been doing it for your own
safe.
they're just preposterous and outrageous.
And education is my platform. That's what Maryland wants. They're talking about the
okay.
And that's what I am experiencing with my own family.
I'm sorry.
That's what
Have you ever seen the campaign?
You've been
it was a
political
Zach Galifianakis Will Ferrell movie, and a very it's not great. It's watchable. It's very relevant nowadays.
Have you ever seen the campain? Right,
it was a stuff, but there's one Zach Galifianakis
series
Will
of
Ferrell
scenes
movie,
that's very.
and
It feels like
very,
this,
where Will Ferrell's character just keeps going around to like all
great.
these things.
It's
and
watchable.
He just has these stupid it's very relevant nowadays with
this is the backbone of the community, and
stuff,
this is freedom.
There's one,
and it just sounds
like
series of scenes
like Will
that's
Ferrell's
very.
character.
It feels
right
like
now,
this,
like
where
God,
Will
family,
Ferrell's
freedom
character just keeps going around to like all these
literally
things,
just,
and he just
it
has these stupid catchphrases
like
this is the backbone of the community, and this is freedom, and it just sounds like he sounds like Will Ferrell's character right now of like God, family, freedom. Like that's it literally just sounds like a
Marylanders of every race, every creed and color are making tough financial decisions, but
Hi,
when it
Alexis.
comes to Black Marylanders,
You're welcome.
the effects of inflation are magnified. Black Americans make 71 cents for every white dollar, and as you pointed out this year, Mr. Moore, white families in Maryland on average have 8 times the wealth of Black families in this great state. What will you do if elected governor to close the racial wealth gap? Not just talk about it. What will you actually put in place to address this, and do reparations play a part in your plan at all? Yeah. I will give that to Mr. Cox first.
So the only thing we need to talk about with reparations is making sure that the people who were robbed of their business and their wealth in the last 2 years with an authority that my opponent supports, and that is a lockdown authority, we need to make sure that we're back in the position to prosper once again. That's my platform and plan. When you look at my opponent, he's talking about transferring wealth away from people because of their skin color. That is racist. It's wrong. I will stand against that and say, I'm a civil rights attorney. I'm about equal justice for all of Maryland, making opportunities, bridge loans, opportunity zones. We need to make sure that all of our citizens in Maryland have what they need to have an education. I mean, it's preposterous when you go to Baltimore City, and I've been there playing ball.
He really likes the word preposterous.
When Mr. Moore refused to attend. And the cry of everyone's heart is,
wait a second.
Our state back on track, both economic.
Was that
have what they need to make sure that all of our citizens in Maryland.
He really likes the word preposterous.
I mean, it's preposterous when you go to Baltimore City, and I've been there playing ball.
Wait a second. I've been there playing ball. All right. Would you like to know what he's referring to there? It's so good. It's so good. Let's pull up the sources again. It's a short clip that he posted. It was a political event.
I've been there playing ball.
Spectacular. All right, would you like to know what
hitting the hoops in West Baltimore with some great guys and an excellent basketball program? This was his like little.
It's a short clip that he posted. It was a political event. This is truly spectacular.
Nice. Hitting the hoops in West Baltimore with some great guys and an excellent basketball program. This was his like little political event.
Oh my gosh!
Nice.
Oh my gosh! You've got to be kidding me! Nice.
That has got to be one of the best. One of the best. Like,
oh my gosh! Oh,
he gets that easy layup, and then hold on.
Kidding me?
That has got to be one of the best. One of the best.
Oh my gosh! I don't know why that brings me such joy.
Nice. He gets that easy layup, and then hold on.
That was very petty of me. But it brings me joy.
And I've been to Morgan State when Mr. Moore refused to attend. And the cry of everyone's heart is,
been there playing ball. Oh my gosh, I don't know why that brings me such joy. But he bricks the easiest layup. All right, that was very petty of me.
His sentences don't make sense.
Racial disparities did not start 2 years ago.
Thank you.
Delegate Cox. We are
been there playing ball.
A long-term challenge that our state has got to wrestle with and address. The fact that we have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap in our state.
His sentences don't make sense.
It's not pretend.
Thank you.
And it's not because one group is working 8 times harder. We have got to address this issue because it's not just impacting one group, it is impacting every single one of us. A recent report showed that the racial wealth gap has cost this country $16 trillion in GDP. Not a group, GDP. And so we've got to focus on creating pathways for work, wages, and wealth. Having an education system that's teaching our young people how not just to be employees, but employers.
Woke.
Making sure that we are increasing wages for Maryland families and getting to a $15 minimum wage and peg it to inflation. Making sure that we're creating pathways for wealth.
Dan Cox is opposed to raising the minimum wage.
Unaffordable homes. That means addressing things like unfair appraisal values in historically redlined neighborhoods. That means fixing broken procurement laws that we have in the state of Maryland that calls for a 29% goal in MBE participation, but we have not come close to hitting that number. We've got
Dan Cox is opposed to raising the minimum wage.
Direction where we're taking meaningful action and reparative action to be able to address the economic gaps that we continue to see in our society.
Listen to the difference in those answers.
I'm sorry, if I need to respond real briefly.
We're going to keep moving this time. We'll come back to another one.
The difference between those answers. Westmore comes with facts and numbers and like, this is what we need to do. These are situations. Listen to the difference in those answers.
And Dan Cox is just like, I've been to Baltimore.
The difference between those answers.
And we need to
freedom
comes
and
with I'm not racist. He's racist.
And numbers.
He's
and
racist
like,
for wanting
this is what
reparations.
These are situations. These are
we need reparations about people whose businesses are affected by COVID.
Baltimore.
That's what we need reparations about. Not racism.
We need to freedom.
And we have it.
I'm not racist.
He's racist. He's racist for wanting reparations. We need reparations about people whose businesses were affected by COVID. That's what we need.
Get away from standardized testing.
That's not a thing that we have anymore. It's
Thank you. And
ridiculous.
The answer is we need to do more. You know, when I've been going all around the state and talking to parents and hearing frustration. And frankly, it's not just a
get away from standardized testing.
I have an 8-year-old son myself. And we have a unique opportunity to get this right.
No.
We have resources that are coming from the federal side, upwards of $1.9 billion that's earmarked towards educational supports. And we've got to ensure that that capital is going towards things like after-school supports, summer supports, advanced tutoring. That we have to make sure that we are properly implementing the blueprint for Maryland's future, which I was very proud to work on. Our administration will fully fund, and in partnership, we will properly implement. And I'm thankful for the support of Maryland's teachers who have backed my campaign.
True.
We are going to move holistically to be able to ensure that our children are getting a world-class education, an education that they deserve, and an education that our communities need them to get.
Mr. Cox.
So I want to begin by mentioning the clarity of what we just heard a minute ago. My opponent stated on record that he is for reparations. This is an extreme and inappropriate, divisive approach to healing the divides that we all know and love to see healed.
Almost slipped up there, Dan.
And Harriet Tubman Great. They sought to use our Constitution, like I have had the privilege of doing with civil rights laws, to advance freedom for everyone, not to create this division that my opponent is now on record saying that he's going to enforce with this redistribution of wealth.
Almost slipped up there, Dan.
Appalling, and it actually reflects the education question that you just asked, because that's part of his education program. That's not going to give us a world-class education. We need to get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic. We need to make sure that STEM technologies are what our kids have access to. We need to make sure that we have school choice. That's part of my platform. I pledge to make sure that our schools actually turn on the HVAC and it works. We are going to restore world-class education in Maryland, and I'm proud to be part of that plan.
It's a good segue to where we're going, gentlemen.
I'm sorry. Can I just make a quick note?
10 seconds, we got to go.
Thank you. That my opponent, when asked a question about education, used it to say something that I did not say. I mean, this is part of this dangerous rhetoric and this divisive rhetoric that will frankly move our state backwards. And I honor what Governor Hogan said, because what Governor Hogan said about you being unfit to be in this office, you are putting on full display right now.
Mr. Moore, instead of back and forth, let's listen to some college.
True.
We asked two journalism students, one moment please, both from
Shut up, Dan.
Salisbury and Morgan State as well. And they want to know from the next governor some questions from their standpoint. This is from Salisbury University.
Hi, I'm Paige Beasley, the editor-in-chief of Salisbury University's student newspaper, The Flyer.
Hi, Beasley.
My question for the candidates is, how will gun
Shut
control
up, Dan.
and crime prevention intersect under your administration?
Okay.
Mr. Cox, if you want to go first on that.
So it's important that we get the guns off the streets that are there illegally and being used illegally for crimes. This is why I was on the...
Wait a second. Beasley.
Illegally and...
If you want to go first on that.
So it's important that we get the guns off the streets that are there illegally.
That are there illegally.
And being used illegally.
And being used illegally for crime. Because...
This is why I
was
on the Governor's Crime Task Force in my Judiciary Committee fighting with my fellow legislators to take guns off the streets that are there illegally.
That are there illegally.
Mr. Moore and his team.
And being used illegally for crime.
Much of this.
Because
refused
decriminalizing much of what? Guns?
The approach is, their approach was to refuse the felony approach that if you've used a gun in crime, that you should go to jail. Instead, they want them to run the streets. That's why we...
Wait a second. Their approach... Decriminalizing much of what? Guns? Is if you're a felon and you use a gun in a crime, you should run the streets.
60%.
And that's why...
Right now.
That's why.
Wait a second.
It's because that's why they want the felons running the street with the guns. Is if you're gonna put the crime statistics on that, and you use a gun in a crime, you should run the streets.
We're going to bring back law
and that's why. Oh, Law and Order. That's not a dog whistle. That's why. It's because that's why they want the felons just running the street with the guns. You're gonna put the crime statistics on that? Real quick. Let's take a look at Law and Order. That's not a dog whistle. History, right? Okay. In a 2016 survey, pull up because I'm aware you got to show your sources, right? In a 2016 candidate profile interview, he was asked history. Right? More restrictive gun control laws survey are they needed to protect public safety? Because strongly disagree. I'm aware. You got to show your sources, right? In the 2022 legislative session candidate profile interview that would ban the possession and sale of ghost restrictive gun control laws, which he compared are they needed to protect public safety? Ukraine strongly. He also voted against legislation that would increase security measures. In the 2022 legislative session, Cox opposed a bill that would ban the possession and sale of ghost guns, which he compared to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. He also voted against legislation that would increase security measures at firearms.
2020 clip of him at the Maryland General Assembly hearing explaining his stance against House Bill 910, which would prohibit Marylanders from manufacturing, possessing, selling, and purchasing certain firearms like ghost guns. Cox said that the founders of America built the guns that were 2020 clip of him at the Maryland General Assembly hearing explaining his stance against House Bill 910, which would prohibit Marylanders from manufacturing, possessing, selling, and purchasing certain firearms like
don't help
solve
guns.
Cox said that the founders of America built the guns that were
very
used
pro
to
Second
win the
Amendment.
Revolutionary War.
He does
and
not
that serial numbers on guns
care about
don't
gun
stop
control.
criminals.
He will
from
not do anything to
committing
get any guns off the
crimes.
street.
And I gotta switch back to
They don't help solve crimes.
It's,
He's very pro Second Amendment. He does.
And it's incredibly
He does not
important because there's no higher
care
priority for
about
any
gun
chief
control.
executive
He
than
will
public
not
safety.
do anything to get any
People
guns
need to
off the
feel
street
safe in their own
ever.
communities, in their own
And
homes,
I gotta switch back
and in their
to
own skin. And I think about what my opponent said that I said, which, by the way, I never said, once again. And also how my opponent likes to say that he backs the blue. The irony is the blue doesn't back you.
True.
Because the police officers have endorsed our campaign. And so the things that we are going to do in partnership in our communities is ensuring that we can get and keep these illegal guns.
Just for background here, Dan Cox has had the support of some sheriffs and like individual officers. The largest police union in Maryland, backed Wes Moore.
And get and keep these violent offenders off of our streets. And there's an important
Just
role
for
that the state
background
plays.
here, Dan Cox has had
the
the support of some sheriffs and like individual officers. The largest police union in Maryland,
that is a
backed
state
Wes
function.
Moore.
Right now, it is understaffed and undermanned. We have to fix that. That we can
Right there, he completely undermines what Dan Cox was saying about him wanting felons who's committed crimes with guns to be roaming the streets.
State resources to be able to make sure we're providing support for violence intervention programs and violence interruption programs, which are continuing to show impacts.
Right there, he completely undermines what Dan Cox was saying about him wanting felons who've committed crimes with guns to be roaming the streets.
Local jurisdictions and also working in partnership with our federal counterparts to ensure we are getting and keeping illegal guns out of our streets and keeping violent offenders out of our neighborhoods.
Mr. Cox, I'll give you a chance to respond if you'd like.
Thank you very much.
10 seconds, please.
Mr. Moore has long worked with Open Society, and they came into my committee, and I have a record of serving and protecting the blue and serving in my committee to defend them because Mr. Moore and his team came in and sought to defund the police in my committee. That was with the Open Society people. That was with the nonprofits that wanted to change and reimagine policing against the police and against you and I as citizens. I fought that. We stopped it. Instead, I'm going to fund the police. That's why sheriffs and officers on duty support me, not just unions, although I support them too.
Oh, careful.
We're going to make sure from day one that our streets are safe again. We will never say, like Mr. Moore said in Salon.com, you can Google it and look it up, that he wants to defund the police.
He did not say
just
that.
He wants to indict the system. Now, that's not talk and rhetoric.
Indict the system. Oh, careful. If there's injustice in the system, you have to indict the system. It's wild. He does back the blue. That is something he's not. He did not say that. Fanatically. Indict the system. If there's injustice in the system, you have to indict
police reform.
He wants qualified immunity.
He does back the blue.
He wants
that
pay
is something
raises.
he's not lying about.
There is a lot. The police
reform bill that he voted against.
What he's
not
in
just
Maryland,
like pro-police. He's anti-police reform.
See if I can
he wants
find
qualified immunity across the board. He wants pay raises.
There is a lot. The police reform bill that he voted against in Maryland is see if I can find the police reform bill. Okay, well I'll take this. Crime and policing on Wikipedia in June 22. Cox released a crime plan on Truth Social that called for allowing modified stop and frisk policies and enacting broken windows policing. Okay, well, I'll take this. Crime and policing on Wikipedia here in June 22.
Cox released a crime plan on Truth
that's
Social
the other
that
thing
called
is that
for
he backs the blue
allowing
unless they're
modified
federal,
stop and
unless they're
frisk
the
policies
FBI,
and enacting broken windows policing.
Yeah, then they're
Cool.
the Stasi, they're the East German secret police, and yeah. That's the other thing is that he backs the blue unless they're federal, unless they're the FBI. Then they're the Stasi, they're the East German secret police. And
my question is, now that the state of Maryland and HBCUs have made a settlement, what are some further steps that you think the state should take in order to further assist the HBCUs in the area?
Mr. Moore.
Great. Thank you so much for that question. And our state is so blessed that we have 4 of the top HBCUs in America here in the state of Maryland. And now we have reached a settlement with the HBCUs that was needed and long overdue. But there's a few different things that we've got to do. One is we need to make sure that the grounds why the settlement was reached in the first place are actually being honored. Because this was about duplication of coursework. This was about giving an unfair advantage to institutions who were not our HBCUs. The challenge is, despite the settlement being done, that practice is still happening. So we have to make sure that the grounds for the settlement are actually being honored. We also have to make sure that this is not just about the initial settlement. When you have 4 of the top HBCUs in America, that helps to address so many other challenges that we are seeing about how are we creating pipelines in our nursing industry. How are we creating pipelines in our education system? How are we creating pipelines of entrepreneurial growth and being able to focus on new industries, solar and wind technologies, cyber and biotech technologies? We should be leveraging the genius of our HBCU students and making them a core part of Maryland's growth story.
Mr. Cox.
Well, unlike my opponent, I actually went to the HBCU debate at Morgan State University, and I spoke with the students there, and I was honored and privileged to be part of that. And one of the things that I said there, and I believe firmly, this is why I voted for the settlement. This is why I voted for our HBCUs to receive equal funding, and that is we need to expand programs for all of them to have things like tech opportunities, to have opportunities to get certifications in their degrees, but most importantly, I actually went through college myself on a Pell Grant. I know exactly how hard it is to make up the gap in your tuition. And yet, many times HBCUs have the funding levels differentiated, thinking that they're somehow receiving more funds than other universities in the state, in the University of Maryland system. But that's just not the case. So we need to make sure we equalize not only the funding to the university, but to make sure that money gets to the student so that they don't have to drop out like, unfortunately, so many students in HBCUs end up doing.
Pamela, back to you.
Thank you. Turning to health care. As you both know, access to abortion care is protected by Maryland law, but not by national law. Depending on the outcome of the election and the makeup of Congress, there could either be a proposal for a national ban on abortion or national protection for abortion. As governor, what would be your position on national abortion legislation? And would you get involved in that national debate on behalf of Marylanders? Delegate Cox, you go first.
No, I'm focused on being the governor of Maryland, and I would make sure that everything that is worked on in Maryland reflects the interests and values of the people. I am pro-life. I am very honored and privileged with my wife to have a special needs son. That's why I fought on the House floor for the Down Syndrome Protection Act. And one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is to ensure that everyone is safe, that women and children and the unborn all have equal protection and are supported by our laws. And so when you look at the national
there's a lot here.
Turned back to the states, we have one of the most liberal abortion laws in the country. And I think that, as governor, there's very little that I can do to override that or change it. So this,
so will you try?
Idea that's come from my opponent that I'm somehow dangerous to
there's a lot
healthcare.
Okay.
It's preponderous. It's false. It's absolutely not true.
Okay. True. What he just said there is, so will you try? Disingenuous. His wording there was very careful at the end. Okay. The idea that's come from my opponent that I'm somehow dangerous to women's healthcare. What he does not say is that I'm somehow opposed to abortion. His wording there was very careful. Why he said women's healthcare there? The idea is because he doesn't view abortion as women's healthcare. That I'm somehow dangerous. So technically, he's telling the truth, but he's skirting around it. He does not say it's not preponderous and it's not
that I'm somehow like
or not
opposed
true.
to abortion.
Because
why he said women's health care there
is because he doesn't view abortion as women's health care.
So this might take a while to
so
break
technically
down.
he's telling the truth, but he's skirting around it.
First, go to
It's not preponderous,
the
and
abortion
it's not
question.
false. Okay,
or not true.
Because
there's a lot there. There's a lot there. So this might take a while to break down. Let's first go to the abortion. Yes,
question.
he's very
is
the basic gist of that. But I want to take a holistic look here because it's not just abortion. Okay. What he basically did there. Yes, he's very. Is the basic.
We're a very liberal state. I
gist
can't do anything about it as governor.
I want to take a
14
holistic
bills
look
on the House
because
floor?
it's not just
to restrict abortion.
Okay.
Including a heartbeat bill.
What he
where
basically did there
no
was
abortion
be allowed after the detection of a heartbeat.
We're a very liberal state. I can't do anything about it as governor.
Which
he introduced
14 bills on the House floor. But outside of abortion, because he said women's health care, and I understand the loophole where no abortion be allowed after the detection of a heartbeat. Is that abortion is women's health care? So let's take a look at women's health care. His history of that. But outside of abortion, because he said women's health care, and I understand the loophole. Well, quickly, let's take a look at his history. All right. So first up, here is the 2016 is that survey. This is unbelievable.
So under what circumstances
at women's health
should abortion
history
be
of
allowed?
that?
Never.
So in the case of preventing the death of the mother,
quickly let's take a look
other
at his
life-saving measures should be sought.
First up, here is
including
the
potential for transplant
survey.
This is unbelievable.
Ectopic
Under
pregnancy.
what circumstances?
So the intent
should
is
abortion
always to
be
save a
allowed?
life and not to kill it.
Never. Even if the transplant.
So in the case of
is
preventing the
unsuccessful.
death of the mother,
That is
other life-saving measures should be sought.
abysmally
Including potential for
stupid.
transplant of the embryo.
It's
Ectopic
one of the dumbest
pregnancies.
things you could ever read.
So the intent is always to save a
you
life
can
and
transplant
not to kill it.
an
Even if the
ectopic
transplant,
pregnancy is
spoiler
unsuccessful.
alert, you cannot.
That is
All right, let's take a look at some of his other
abysmally stupid.
policies.
It's
Here
one
we
of
go.
the dumbest things you could
he
ever
was
read
one of
there.
21 lawmakers.
He thinks you can transplant
to vote against
an
raising
ectopic
the minimum
pregnancy.
marriage age.
Spoiler
in
alert.
Maryland. You
From
cannot.
15 to 17.
All right, let's take a look
In
at
an
some
interview,
of his
he said a
other-
pregnant 16-year-old should be allowed to marry the father.
Policies. Here we go. He doesn't
He
clarify
was
whether
one of
that
21
pregnant
lawmakers
16-year-old is marrying like another
to
16-year-old
vote against
17-year-old
raising the
or
minimum
an
marriage
adult
age
in Maryland.
from 15 to
Yeah.
17.
So
in an
voted
interview,
against
he
that.
said a pregnant
He was one of
16-year-old
5
should
members
be allowed
of
to
the
marry
House
the
of Delegates
father.
to vote against a safe harbor bill.
He doesn't
that
clarify
forbids
whether
prosecuting
that
child
pregnant
sex
16-year-old
trafficking
is marrying
victims
like
for
another
prostitution.
16-year-old, 17-year-old.
He said
or an
he was
adult.
convinced the prosecutions protected children.
Yeah.
And that the
So
police
he voted against
needed
that.
the tool in
He
the
was
toolbox
one of 5 members
as
of the
leverage
House of Delegates
to
to
persuade
vote
victims
against
to
a
help safe
tax
harbor
the
bill
pimps,
that forbids
because nothing
prosecuting
else would
child
overcome
sex
the
trafficking
children's
victims
fear
for prostitution.
of the traffickers.
He said
Every single
he
police
was
officer
convinced
testified
the
to my recollection
prosecutions
in front of our
children,
committee indicated
and that the
they
police do not
needed
ever
the
mistreat
tool
a
in the
minor
toolbox
in the
as
prosecution
leverage
of prostitution
to persuade victims
thank
to help
God.
catch
Thank God
the
the
pimps.
police
Because
nothing else would overcome
said that.
the children's
Well, I mean,
fear
you just
of the
you
traffickers.
gotta.
Every single
You
police officer
gotta.
testified to my recollection in front of our committee
All right,
indicated
let's
they
take a look at
do
another
not
one.
ever mistreat a minor
Criminal law
in the
sexual
prosecution
crimes, the
of
repeal of
prostitution.
spousal defense.
Oh, thank
Love
God!
is no
thank God
defense
the
to sexual
police
crimes.
So what this bill did
Said that.
HB
Well, I mean, you just-
0147.
you gotta.
It repealed
You
the
gotta.
prohibition on prosecuting a person for rape
Unbelievable.
or
All right,
certain.
let's take a look
sexual
at
offense
another one.
against a victim who was the
criminal
person's
law,
legal
sexual
spouse at the
crimes,
time
the
of the
repeal
alleged
of
rape or
spousal
sexual
defense.
offense.
Love
So
is
basically
no
what this
defense
does
to sexual
is,
crimes.
So what this bill did
take away the protection
0147
of
it repealed
marriage
prohibition on
to
prosecuting
allow
a
for
person for rape
Um,
or a certain sexual offense against a
he
victim
was
who was the person's legal
the
spouse at the
only
time of the alleged rape
person
or
on the
sexual
judicial
offense.
committee
So basically what
to
this
vote
does
no
is
to this bill.
take away
Don't know what his
the
reasoning
protection
was.
of
I don't know if he
marriage.
thinks you can't
to
get
allow
raped if
for
you're
rape.
married, but
that's his state. He
was
was
his stance
the only
person on the
there.
judicial committee.
So yeah,
to
I
vote no.
don't
to this
see
bill.
him being
Don't know what his reasoning was.
very
I don't know if he thinks
you know,
you can't get raped if you're married, but That's his state. His
opposes the Affordable Care Act. He opposes socialized medicine.
I don't
see
him
think being
he's very good for women's health care outside of abortion, and he's certainly anti-abortion. Like, if that matters to you, don't believe him when he says, he just
don't think
can't do anything about it. Shrug my shoulders. Women's health care outside of abortion, and he's certainly anti-abortion. Like, if that matters to you, don't believe him when he says,
I want Maryland to be a safe haven.
Can't do anything about it. Shrug my shoulders.
I backed back last fall for a constitutional amendment, and if I become the governor, I will make sure that I will back it again. This is something that is not just a national issue. This is an issue for Maryland's women who want their health care to be protected. And when the Supreme Court made the decision to rob millions of women of health care, my opponent then the same day praised the Supreme Court and praised Donald Trump. So my opponent is very clear about where he stands on health care. He's very clear on the fact that he would criminalize abortion even in the case of incest and rape. He's very clear on where he is on abortion care.
True.
That he says that even in the case where the mother's life is in risk, that he would either force the mother to have the child or arrest her. He is very clear. And we have very different views. Abortion is health care.
True.
Scott, shaking your head. Do you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Jason. That is absolutely false. In fact, if you look at the abortion legislation, the pro-life bills I put in to the legislature, where I've actually had to work on this across the aisle with my colleagues, I have had the 3 exceptions in the law. I believe that is a legal process that should be followed.
Okay, pause there. He had the exceptions for his bill about Down syndrome. He wanted to ban abortions based on fetal anomalies like Down syndrome. He did have an exception in that.
Okay, pause there.
The fetal heartbeat bill. He did not have exceptions, except I think for his bill about survival of the mother. He wanted to ban abortions based 2 separate fetal anomalies like Down syndrome. He did have an exception. So a little disingenuous there. And the fetal heartbeat bill. He did not have exception for, except I think for the survival of the mother, and in that case, 2 separate physicians to verify that it was at risk. So a little disingenuous there.
Trust what comes out of my opponent's mouth. I will say this: I will defend unborn life, but not take into, this is why I'm running for governor, not take into my power something that is not constitutional. When you hear my opponent saying that he's going to force into the Constitution a protection all the way through not only the 3rd trimester, but the third, transaction, all the way through the 3rd trimester.
Well, there we go.
That's his approach, and it's wrong. It's absolutely disgusting to think that that's the position of my opponent. It's extreme, and I will instead follow the law.
With a direct.
Okay. Transaction. Follow the law. Once again, there we go. Back to the 2016 survey. Under what circumstances should abortion be allowed? That is the question directed at Dan Cox. He responds, never. Okay. So in the case of preventing the death of the mother, once again, should be sought to the 2016 survey of the embryo. Under what circumstances? So the intent should abortion save a life be allowed, not kill it, even if the transplant question directed at Dan Cox. He responds, never. So in the case of preventing the death of the mother, other life-saving measures should be sought, including potential for transplant of the embryo at ectopic pregnancies. So the intent is to always save a life and not kill it, even if the transplant is unsuccessful.
I trust women to make this decision with their doctors, not politicians and judges. This is a deeply personal and important thing for Maryland women, and frankly, all Marylanders to be able to embrace. And once again, while I think my opponent, both his actions and deeds, both historic and present, they speak for themselves. I want to be very, very clear. In a Moore Miller administration, we will protect reproductive rights. In a Moore Miller administration, we will make sure that Maryland is a safe haven for abortion care.
All right, gentlemen, we'll move on.
I need to respond.
We're going to keep moving, sir. We're going to keep moving. We'll get to this next question here with Tracy.
Yes.
So sticking with the topic of health care and women's reproductive rights, I'd like to start with Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox, you are opposed to government mandates for vaccines against COVID, a potentially deadly virus. You cite that as why you ran for delegate, but you support the government telling women when they can and cannot practice the right to have an abortion. You have supported 14 bills restricting or rolling back abortion access as a delegate. Why do women's bodies deserve government oversight when you don't want oversight for your own body?
Well, that's just a very loaded question that's certainly demonstrating bias, because that's not my position at all. I think it's really obnoxious that the government wished to take possession of our bodies against the law. The healthcare system allows for the decisions to be made between the individual and her doctor or his doctor. And that was what was trampled on the last 2 years. And so I stood firmly in saying I'm for vaccines, personal choices for that, but I'm opposed to vaccine passports. And that's what my opponent embraces. You couldn't even go to some of his events without demonstrating that you had an experimental vaccine. That's not the kind of direction of our state. It's not America. People should have their choices in these decisions. And as to the bills,
I don't even know if I want to get into
that. The bills that I have supported have had exceptions. They have always focused on things like making sure women are safe with the distribution of medication, making sure women are safe in their procedures and in their ambulatory clinics, making sure that
I don't even know if I want to get into that.
Children like Down syndrome are not targeted just
little
because
children
of
like Down
disabled.
syndrome.
That's the future of abortion. My opponent is extreme on this issue. He, right now, will support and sign a constitutional amendment, and I believe, sir, that you would sign the bill that would also deny care after birth to someone who survived
Little children
an
like
abortion.
Down syndrome.
That's extreme. My approach is more mainstream.
But Mr. Cox, if you could just please answer the question about government oversight when it comes to one's
Just answer the question.
And why, when it comes to vaccines, your feeling is that there should not be government oversight there, but for access to health care, there should be.
The government's not forcing anybody about abortion. The government is forcing individuals
sure about that?
to take a vaccine or lose their jobs.
Just answer the question.
Many people have taken the vaccine. I applaud them. But even they agree in a majority that those who cannot, whether for disability or religious purposes, should not lose their job over this. That's why I've been fighting.
You sure about that?
Or is there any?
Oh man, I don't even know if I want to get into this because it's a mess. But like, do you? One, there's all kind of limits on employment, especially for. I mean, I'm a federal contractor. I'm aware of this. In terms of, man, I don't even know if I want to get into this. For getting the job, like what you need to have medically, like all this stuff. Like, so one more vaccine. Like that's why is that the bridge? All kind of limits on employment, especially for. I mean, right? We are in a unprecedented. Unprecedented, like at least for 100 years, requirements for getting the situation like with the pandemic, have medically, like all the stuff with people dying. One more vaccine, like that's yeah. I'm sorry, why is that the bridge? One desperate times do call for desperate measures. Right. We are in a unprecedented. Like, there are times I would agree at least to an extent on situation with the pandemic in most situations, but in some extenuous circumstances. Yeah, I'm sorry that sometimes desperate times do call for desperate measures. Need to be. There are times not the law, but like precedent needs to go out the window, and like government control needs to be taken in order in most situations. But in Lincoln some suspended habeas extenuous circumstances during the Civil War, like sometimes the law does that extreme measures have to be taken. Or not the law, but like precedent, and like that's not the window, and like. Control needs to be taken in order to provide safety. Society. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. Like there are some times that extreme measures have to be taken to provide safety, and like that's not
during the height of the pandemic.
That's
we
society.
Had a member
that's
of
not
the Maryland General Assembly look to impeach Governor Hogan.
True.
For his handling of it. We had a member of the Maryland General Assembly who sought to impeach Governor Hogan because he chose to follow the science, because he chose to listen to the CDC and the NIH, because he chose to listen to Johns Hopkins University and the University of Maryland Medical Center.
True.
That member of the Maryland General Assembly was Dan Cox.
True.
And by the way, he stood alone. Even his Republican
also true.
Did not back that. So when we're talking about what it means and what's going to happen in a more Miller administration, we are going to follow the science. We are going to listen to doctors and medical experts and not ideologues.
Wow.
Also true.
How dare you?
The safety of the people of Maryland first and foremost in all of the decisions that we are going to make, and we are going to work across the state, across the aisle, and working with professionals in order to help us make those decisions.
How dare you?
Would you like to answer the question about what within Maryland?
She takes no prisoners.
Would you expand and or limit? Mr. Moore.
Oh, yes, please. And so, when we talk about abortion being healthcare, it's really important to remember what it is and who it is that we're talking about. Because when we're talking about
takes no prisoners.
Abortions, 99% of abortions are not late-term abortions. When we're talking about truly late-term abortions, it's usually because there's a medical emergency.
Usually.
It's usually because that family is about to make one of the most difficult decisions of their life. It's because that family has now received news, chances are unexpected news, that no parent would ever want to have to make, and no person would ever want to have to make. And so I trust women to be in partnership and relationship with their doctors. And I do not believe that lawyers and politicians and judges should be getting in the way of that relationship between a woman and her doctor.
So no restrictions?
That's not what my opponent believes, because he stood here just now saying that he would decide whether or not you are forced to take an experimental EAU authorized vaccine.
Oh my gosh.
That's not the approach of freedom. And I think that
so no restrictions?
Let's let the people decide. That's my approach. I want to get back to safety, making sure we have affordable housing, making sure we have freedom to make our own decisions, and
not just affordable housing, housing for all.
Unfortunately, my opponent stands right here and says that he can make your decisions better than you on some of these issues, and that's wrong.
I find that the usage of the word freedom.
I'm sorry. Hold on. What did you just say?
Stands right here and says
not just affordable housing, housing for all.
Unfortunately, my opponent stands right here and says that he can make your decisions better than you on some of these issues, and that's wrong.
I find that the usage of the word freedom.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Because
what did you just say?
My opponent talks about freedom, but not the freedom of a woman or girl who potentially would have to carry their rapist child.
Wow.
We talk about freedoms, but he's talking about the ability to criminalize.
Oh, I thought he was going to say practice.
Patients and the providers. So if we're going to talk about freedom, let's make sure we're consistent in understanding what you mean by freedom, sir.
That's not true. Alexis, you're up.
This will go to Mr. Moore first. Legal marijuana is a big business here in Maryland.
I thought he was going to say practice.
Have a plethora of dispensaries to choose from, but an overwhelming majority of those dispensaries are owned by Marylanders who do not identify as persons of color. We know that Black Marylanders have bore the brunt of legal repercussions for illegal marijuana use. Now that the tide is changing, do you think it's fair to leave Black entrepreneurs that are qualified out of this business that made $600 million last year in this state alone? Do you think there's an equity problem, and what will you do to address it when it comes to legal marijuana?
Thank you. And it is a problem, and it will be fixed and rectified in a more Miller administration. You know, we have to understand that if the state votes on question 4, and that in our administration, we will make sure that this rollout is going to be fair and it is going to be equitable. And that means using this as an opportunity to think clearly about how are we going about the prospects of positioning licenses. How are we thinking about not just everything from the growers and the manufacturers and the paraphernalia providers, but truly using this as an opportunity to help address the wealth gap that exists within our society. But we also have to understand that it's not just going to be about that we cannot talk about the benefits of legalization if we're also not dealing with the consequences of criminalization.
Hey.
And where we've seen inside of communities, and particularly Black and brown communities that has been disproportionately harmed, that we have to focus on things like automatic record expungement for those who have cannabis convictions. We have to focus on things like being able to deal with the pardoning of people who have criminal records for something that is now a burgeoning industry in the state of Maryland. This is a unique opportunity for the state of Maryland to get this right. And in our administration, both on the economic equity, but also on the social justice perspective, this is going to be a core priority.
Mr. Cox.
Our laws shouldn't be based upon social justice reimagining of my opponent. We need to get back to fairness and equal justice under law.
I'm sorry. Is that sentence even grammatically correct?
Mr. Cox.
Our laws shouldn't be based upon social justice reimagining of my opponent.
There's something missing in that sentence. I can't put my finger on it. I'm sorry. Is that sentence even grammatically correct?
And equal justice under law. Everyone should be treated equal. That's why I do support making sure that those who are
there's something missing in that sentence.
No longer criminalized.
I can't put my finger on it.
What about record expungement? People to reestablish themselves so they don't lose their job or something like that. That's something that I have worked across the island. In fact, in my committee, worked to decriminalize a few plants, particularly when you consider how so many people have appreciated the effects.
What about record expungement?
PTSD. So, but that's not the same issue that we're dealing with. We need to have a regulatory approach. And
I need to have a regulatory.
With our construction industry, with our law enforcement, with all sectors to ensure that there's appropriate testing, to make sure that there's safety on the job, and to make sure that when we walk down the street that people know the rules.
Interesting. Okay. I need to have a regulatory. Ooh. Very interesting. Interesting. Okay. His record. Very interesting. Support this. His record does not support this. His record when it comes to cannabis. First, let's take a look once again at our old friend. Here we go. Boom. Our old friend, the 2016 when it comes survey. Marijuana should be legalized and regulated like tobacco and alcohol. First, let's take a look once again at our old friend. Here we go. Now let's take a look at this legislation. Boom. There's two bills. Our old friend, the 2016 7 CH marijuana. All right. Should be legalized basically and regulated. What it is. Tobacco and alcohol. General Assembly passed a bill that would allow voters to decide whether to amend the state's constitution. This is giving power to the people. Take a look at this legislation. The General Assembly passed a bill that will allow voters to decide whether to amend the state constitution. Basically, what it is. Of up to General Assembly passed a bill that would allow voters to decide whether to amend the state's constitution. This is giving power to the people. July 1. The General Assembly passed a bill that will allow voters criminal justice policy and regulate marijuana to decide whether to amend the state constitution to legalize the possession of up to 1.5 ounces of personal use marijuana for people above age 21. The law once again, these are us voting. A separate Cox would voted against criminal justice policy and regulate marijuana possession and usage. Cox voted against a bill to decriminalize the possession of drug paraphernalia. Would take effect January 1. Yeah. Once again, these are us to vote on it. Voting and Cox voted against in this debate. Suddenly, measures small amounts of marijuana. Cox voted against a bill to decriminalize the possession of drug paraphernalia. Like this is classic politics changed. Yeah, depending on what he doesn't want us to vote on, or just like, and he doesn't want to legalize. And then in this debate, suddenly, small amounts of marijuana. Yeah, you're either just like this is classic politics changed depending on what is popular or just live.
And if you would name a policy of his that you would continue or something that you'd be anxious to change.
Mr. Moore, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, you know, I applaud the governor for being so early and full-throated about the danger of this MAGA movement. I applaud the governor for calling it out early for what it is. That this is a danger to the basic values of democracy. And I'm thankful that the governor has come out and very early said that he will not support the Republican nominee, despite that being the nominee of his party. But the thing is, I know about this. When it comes to where we are as a state, we've got to move faster. We've got to make sure that we can have true measurements of economic growth within our state. And that means being able to focus on helping to reduce the regulatory red tape for our small businesses, making sure that we can fix broken procurement laws to increase liquidity to our small and our micro businesses, making sure that we're putting a real focus on our MBEs and our WBEs, being able to provide economic and also educational supports, job retraining, job reskilling, focusing on apprenticeship programs and trade programs. Because right now in the state of Maryland, we have 2 available jobs for every single person filing for unemployment. Because we have a disconnect when it comes to skill sets and the skills that are required for Maryland's growing and diverse economy. We've got to focus on that.
Final grade, A, B, C, D, or something else?
Well, he's not done yet, so it's incomplete.
Cop out.
Mr. Cox.
We'll handle it, Mr. Cox. I'd give Governor Hogan an A on everything except the differences of opinion we've had on the handling of COVID. But I will say.
Okay, I understand he gave that exception. He tried to impeach him. The only time a Maryland governor has ever been even attempted to be impeached was Dan Cox trying to impeach. I understand he gave that exception, and he gives him an A.
Say this: I have
the
stood
most.
with Governor Hogan.
He tried to
impeach
him.
Are protected and backed. My opponent would like to defund the police, and he actually.
The only time a Maryland governor has ever been even attempted to be impeached was Dan Cox trying to impeach Larry Hogan, and he gives him an A.
Stood against the taxes.
The most
that
disingenuous
we saw 42 tax
person.
increases back then. You are going to see tax increases like never before. The tolls are going to rise if Mr. Moore's
Oh my
governor.
gosh.
I will stand against that because I did it. I proved it. I've already done that in the legislature. I've stood with the governor on all of these issues. And I've also stood with the governor on school choice. And when you look at Mr. Moore's policies, he's about centralizing education. He's about indoctrination on his website from the state education department. That's not the approach.
What?
We need to put parents back in charge.
What?
He's about indoctrination. And when you look at Mr. Moore's policies, he's about centralizing education. He's about indoctrination on his website from the state education department. That's not the approach of Maryland. We need to put parents back in charge. That's what I plan to do as your next governor.
I want to be clear. There is nothing in my plan that calls for the raising of taxes. Nothing. Not a word. So I want to be clear with the people of Maryland about what is fact and what is fiction.
Okay.
Now,
well, that may be true.
Is my opponent's economic plan that he has put out there would literally defund the police, defund education, and bankrupt the state. Literally. And I don't say that. That's not an ideological position.
Okay.
That's
well, that may be true.
When you are looking at the things that we are focusing on in our economic plan, we're focusing on growth. Because we need for our economy to grow, and we need to make sure we have
just do math, Dan.
In our economy. And that means things like fixing a broken child care system. Because right now we've had over 750 child care centers closed since the start of COVID. Oftentimes they are female entrepreneurs and are never treated as such. And we have to be able to get parents, particularly parents of young
just
children,
do math,
back
Dan.
into the workforce. It means focusing on job reskilling and job retraining. In my opinion, we swung the pendulum far too swift in one direction when we started evaluating high schools exclusively on four-year college acceptance rates, when that's not the path for every student. It wasn't my path. So we have to get our economy going and making sure we're getting more people able to participate in the new economy, in Maryland's new economy.
My economic plan will not defund the police. I've fought for 4 years to support
Ooh, that
the
stuck
police
with him.
Making sure they have the funding.
Ooh, that stuck
with
with
the
him.
governor on this issue. My opponent actually is on record, Salon.com, saying he will defund the police because of 400 years.
Salon? Did Salon pay Dan Cox? What is? This is the most aggressive advertising for Salon.com I've ever seen. It's kind of brilliant. Dan is just on repeat.
That's ludicrous. It's extreme.
Salon? Did Salon pay Dan Cox?
To the fact
What is? I'm sure you do. This is the most aggressive advertising for Salon.com I've ever seen. It's kind of brilliant. Dan is just on a repeat.
For our senior taxes, we have to lower our senior
okay.
taxes. And when you look at the income,
he didn't say he was going to raise them. I'm sure you do.
5.5% income tax rate for businesses. Maryland's at 8.25%. It's no wonder jobs aren't flourishing here, and it's no wonder we don't have the training and opportunities that we need to have. I will turn it around and say, let's keep Maryland open.
He didn't say he was going to raise them.
Lower our taxes, not just pretend that you're not going to raise them, because every time you increase spending, like my opponent's plan includes, you're going to have taxes come to roost very soon, and I will stand against that, just as Governor Hogan has done.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to go to Pamela now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shifting topics, yesterday, as you may know, was National Coming Out Day, and in America, we've come a long way in embracing and accepting people who are LGBTQ+. My question is about public schools. We know that young people who identify as LGBTQ face a lot of challenges. Do you believe these children are being adequately supported in our public schools? And are public schools doing a good enough job educating the whole student body about LGBTQ issues? The question goes first to Delegate Cox.
No, we're not doing enough, because too many times we exclude the parents from involvement. In fact, I fought against a bill that would literally allow 12-year-olds to receive counseling without their parents even knowing. That's wrong. We need to make sure that parents are involved, because the data shows that when parents are involved in their children's lives, all of the concerns, whether it be emotional, sociological, or physical concerns, are so much better handled. And that's what I pledge to do as your next governor. What I will do also is ensure that the indoctrination stops. We cannot have transgender indoctrination in kindergarten. I mean, that's
okay.
Preposterous. That's exactly what my opponent supports. It's on his website. I will stand against that and eradicate that from the curriculum and get back to world-class learning, making sure it's all about STEM technology, making sure we have reading, writing, and arithmetic, so that our kids can learn like God's intended them to learn. Because why? Every person is made.
This is incoherent drivel.
No, we're not doing enough.
We're not doing enough to support. We exclude the parents. Okay. What happens, Dan, when someone, when a student, a 12-year-old or something, comes out to their school counselor, we're not doing enough to support, is fearful of their parents finding out because they're homophobic bigots? What happens? What then, Dan? Would you support when someone, including the parents, when a student, a 12-year-old or something, the child comes out to their school counselor? Of course you would. And is fearful of their parents finding out because they're homophobic bigots.
A bill that would literally allow
what
12-year-olds to receive
would you 12-year-olds, including the parents in that discussion? Why is it wrong? The child's fear? Of course you would. Why? Because if crazy. Like, if they're receiving counseling because they don't trust their parents or they're fearful of their parents, counseling, you don't want the parents. Why is it wrong? Aware of that, like, where's the disconnect? Why?
Need to make sure that parents are involved, because
like,
the data
if they're receiving counseling because they don't trust their parents or they're supportive of their parents, you don't want the parents. Which one of those categories? Like, where's the emotional, socioeconomic, or whatever, and physical? Which one of those does LGBT not just involved identity issues fall into? Supportive. I know his answer to this. It's mental. Which one of those categories? That's his view. But emotional, socioeconomic, or whatever, and physical. No. Which one of those does LGBT identity issues fall into? Is that? I know his answer to this. It's mental health. But that's his view. But he's not going to say that on his website. It's on his website? No. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's on his website. Hold on. It's on his website. Let's see here. Wes Moore. Let's on his website. It. Where is it? On his website for Maryland. Westmore.com. Oh my gosh. It's on his website. Let's see. It's on his website. Transgender. Let's see here. Transgender. Wes LGBTQ. Let's try this one first. Where is it? Not here. Westmore for Maryland.
Maryland across the nation.
Let's see.
Adversity in higher levels than many other communities.
Transgender.
Transgender. To provide a brief sex more than half of the LGBTQ youth in Maryland report they've been harassed or assaulted in schools. I believe that for the LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to experience depression, suicide, adversity in higher levels than many other communities. And housing instability, food intersections. True. I'm not seeing more than half of the LGBTQ plus youth in Maryland report they've been harassed or assaulted in schools. I believe that plus population. LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to experience depression, LGBTQ plus by fully implementing experiencing housing instability, food insecurity, schools adopt LGBTQ plus affirming policies and create partnerships with organizations commitment to better the well-being of Maryland, additional resources that needed to support population and access to trauma-informed students who identify as LGBTQ plus by fully implementing Trans Health Equity Act to ensure transgender Marylanders can receive the gender-affirming health care they need. LGBTQ plus affirming policies abolish Maryland's outdated laws that criminalize HIV used to provide additional resources that needed to support students and to provide access to trauma-informed mental health care in schools. Transgender Marylanders can receive the gender-affirming health care they need. Elementary school. Abolish Maryland's outdated laws that criminalize HIV indoctrination. And stigmatize the LGBTQ plus. Sure, the college. I am not seeing elementary school transgender pipeline indoctrination. I make child educate. Don't know. Shit. It's not here. Oh no. It's not here. I'm not seeing transgender one pager here. What's this? Make child educate. Building an opportunity. Shit. Let's see. Maryland. It's not here. Higher levels than many other communities. It's not here. I'm not seeing transgender. Was very involved in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. What's this? Don't see indoctrinate elementary students. What we just read. Transgender ideology. Wes was very involved in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Nice. Unless I missed it there. Don't see indoctrinate elementary students. Also, there are more things to learn about in school. Transgender ideology. There's whatever classes.
Every person is made in the imago.
Unless I missed it there.
Has an equal opportunity, made in the image of God, to have unalienable rights that we protect. And we can't do that when we exclude parents.
Also, there are more things to learn about in school.
Like God's intended them to learn.
There's health classes. Every person has been made in the imago Dei.
Every person has an equal opportunity.
Equal opportunity.
Made in the image of God to have unalienable rights that we protect. We can't do that.
Can't do that when we exclude parents. Wait. I would really like him to break that down. Every person has been made in the imago Dei. Equal really opportunity. Like that doesn't make sense to me. We're made in the image of God. We have unalienable rights. Can't do that we protect. Okay. I would really like him to break that down for me. Is this like the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing from the Constitution? Okay. I would really like. We can't do that if we exclude parents. That doesn't make sense to me. We're made in the image of God. Where's that leap? We have unalienable rights that we protect. Talk about excluded middle. Like, you just jumped from A to C, right? Quick. Is this like the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing from the Constitution? Okay. But we can't do that if we exclude parents.
Going on in kindergartens that's harmful to children?
Where's that leap?
The documents that are being
talk about excluded middle? Like, you just jumped from A to C, right? Quick. Nope.
At this moment in Maryland called genderqueer, which depict things that I cannot show you on television. It's so disgusting. We're going to change that and say, let's get back to math. Let's get back to making sure that our kids know how to read and write. Right now in Baltimore City, for instance, 7% passage rate in some of these schools. These schools need our help. We need to make sure that the $2 billion, for instance, that went into Baltimore City last year, that is actually getting to the classroom, to the teachers, and to the students.
Okay. Fine. Real quick. Yes, Genderqueer is a book that has been included in some libraries and is a very often challenged book. And it does depict things that you would not be able to show on television.
Here's my issue with his qualification.
Fine. Real quick.
Sex education,
yes, gender
in general,
regardless of the grade
has
level,
been included in some
it's not
libraries,
something that you could
very
show
often
on
challenged
TV
for the most part. And it does
depict things that you would not be able to show in
class.
television.
Biology. Here's my issue with his sex is something that
needs to
sex
be taught
education
in schools
in general,
regardless of the grade level.
STDs.
It's not something
all
that
of
you
this
could
stuff show on
that
TV
is
for the most part.
Also
there
are
the health
like
class
all aspects
biology
of that need to be taught. What
sex is something that
your objection is not
taught in sex education.
Safe sex, and
it probably
STDs
is,
and all of this stuff.
He probably thinks that's the domain of the parents again.
Also a part.
There are all aspects,
but
of
even
that
if it
need
was,
to be
I think
taught.
he'd be fine
with sex education. As
your
long
objection
as you're
is not
talking about
gay sex.
Sex education.
I honestly think that's his problem.
It probably is.
Mr. Moore,
he probably
what
thinks
do you
that's the
believe
domain
public
of the
schools
parents.
should be doing to support and educate LGBTQ plus students?
Well, I mean,
but even if it was, I think he'd be fine with sex education as long as you aren't talking about.
And it's important for the state.
I
to
honestly think that's
a
his
partner in that, but we don't dictate to the local jurisdictions as to how their educational processes work. There is something that I do think it's important for people to understand, though.
Trans
I
indoctrination.
have an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son.
Okay.
All I ever want for my children is for them to be seen and for them to feel like they're being heard. And I want the same thing for every child. And so there's a stat that always does
trans indoctrination
as well. It's looking at the accelerated youth homelessness rate for LGBTQ youth in our state. It's looking at the fact that trans children,
what's the stat?
Trans individuals, 80% of trans individuals have contemplated suicide.
Oh, that's not the stat you're talking about. But that
I want to say to terrible. All of our LGBTQ youth and families, I see you and I hear you.
What's
and
the
all
stat?
Policies that will be made in partnership, because that is how we have to lead as a state.
Oh, that's not the state
partnership.
But that is
gentlemen.
Thank
you, Tracy.
Well, if I may respond briefly. So I have children also. As you know, I'm very blessed, my wife and I, and we believe and we understand that when any child is struggling, as my opponent identified, you cannot cut the parent out of that discussion, and that's exactly what my opponent plans to do, because that's the policy right now under this new approach that I have opposed, and that's wrong. We have to get back to making sure
did you oppose Hogan?
To make sure that when I have the opportunity to sit down with my son or daughter, that they know Dad is always in the mix for them.
And Mr. Cox, you're mentioning
even if they're gay or trans.
We're going to go ahead to Tracy.
And I'm sorry. Can I please just say one thing? I am very involved in my children's education.
When did you oppose Hogan?
And I care deeply about their education. Do you know who also cares deeply about their education? They're educators. Because we have the
even
same
if they're
goal.
gay or trans?
It's to make sure that my children are prepared for the world that they are going to inherit. And we want the same thing for all of our children. And educator participation is not indoctrination. This is a partnership that we have between parents and educators.
But
we're
not
getting up
under your
against our time
plan.
here, gentlemen.
Parents
Tracy
out under
now.
your plan.
Gentlemen, we're going to give Tracy the floor.
So I would like to shift the conversation to climate change. There was a federal lawsuit filed yesterday by environmental groups to try and prohibit the widening of I-270 and part of the Capitol Beltway with toll lanes as proposed by Governor Larry Hogan. The suit claims the expansion promotes auto dependency and will exacerbate climate change. Where do you stand on transportation and its impacts on the environment in this state? We can start with Mr. Cox.
Well, thank you. I'm a strong advocate. In fact, every year that I've run for office, I've been advocating to ensure that our transportation works so that we have our families getting home to be with their families and to have that opportunity to get home to dinner instead of sitting in what we call a parking lot in my district of 270. That's unconscionable. It actually hurts the environment to sit there and to have the car idling so much. So I support widening I-270. I support widening our bridges and securing our transportation. That's why I will look to the Transportation Trust Fund to bring transparency to that and to make sure that we get these projects done. My opponent, though, wants to ban gasoline cars. His response is to force us all into some kind of public transportation system. That's the Moore-Miller approach because his running mate was one of the individuals that co-sponsored the legislation. So I will not support that. I believe very strongly in ensuring all the above options are there. And I will support transportation as we need to improve it and make sure that works for every Marylander.
Mr. Moore.
I'll once again start with that is just not true. But when we talk about transportation assets, we are going to make sure that we are doing things like addressing the deep congestion that sits on 270 in the Beltway. It is psychologically, economically, and environmentally dangerous to have that level of congestion. So we are going to address that, along with making sure that we are fixing the American Legion Bridge over this next decade. It is unsafe, along with making sure that we are going to get the Red Line done in Baltimore. Because you cannot talk about economic vitality if you do not have east-west transit. But there are three lenses that we're going to look at every single economic project. One, it's through the lens of equity, making sure we're understanding who is building it and who can benefit from it. The second is the environment, making sure that the transportation assets that we're pulling together are actually not only not hurting the environment, but actually using transportation assets to help it. And then the third piece is making sure there is local involvement and local engagement. We are going to address the issue of congestion, but we are going to make sure that we're doing it in an environmentally sound way. And that includes things like being able to add the electrification of the grid for electric vehicles. That means adding mass transit options. This is Maryland's time to lead on this. We have unique resources to do so, and that's what Maryland will do.
Remember, try to be quick with one last question, but get you into your closing statements. One last one from Alexis.
Okay, before we get to the last question, Dan Cox on. Wait. Whoopsie daisy. There it is. All right. Okay, before we get to the last question, Dan Cox on. Whoopsie daisy. There it is. All right. All right. Yeah. Dan Cox on the environment. All right. Let me switch to my sources page. All right. Yeah. Sources. Dan Cox on Wikipedia. Cox rejects the environment since it's on climate change. He voted against the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021, SB 414, a proposed climate bill that would have included a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions
Sources.
50% lower than it was in 2006 by 2030.
Cox rejects
the bill
the
was reintroduced in the 2022 climate change legislation.
He voted against the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021, SB Cox said he would support repealing
climate
the
bill that would have included a goal to reduce greenhouse gas
emissions
in
to a level that is
50% lower than it was in
current regulations on domestic oil exploration and drilling was reintroduced
more restrictive legislation strongly
session.
Agreed.
September 22, Cox said he would support repealing the state ban on fracking in the 2015 survey. Current regulations on domestic oil exploration and drilling are more restrictive
going to pretend
to necessary strongly
so that
agree.
But he's doing it for the purpose of
I do not believe he believes people can get home with their families. There you go.
He's opposed public transit,
which is so weird.
I'm so confused
why
people are in
270
so that
transit, but
but he's doing it for
If you are elected
the purpose of
to
like
the seat of governor for the state of Maryland,
people can get home with their families.
There you go. And specifically
he's opposed public transit, which is so weird. I'm so confused why people are anti-transit.
Next to highways, next to power plants, and industrial areas that have more pollution.
Thank you. Leave no one behind. That is the mantra, that's the agenda that we are going to have for our, not just campaign, but for our administration. That every single community must be seen and heard in conversations. And the truth is, for many of you who have said to me over the past year and a half, we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard by our elected officials. The reality is, for many of you, you haven't been. That there's a reality of, for example, in Baltimore, that children in Baltimore have double the asthma rate of the rest of this state. There's a reality that in the Eastern Shore, because of climate change, that we have literally a quarter of the Eastern Shore that in the next 50 years is in danger of flooding for its businesses and homes. And so we're going to make sure that we're starting with a core focus on building out equitable frameworks in the way that we're talking about environmental supports, affordable housing, making sure that we're addressing the healthcare disparities, and that includes things like the negotiation of prescription drug costs, and making sure we're making it easier for seniors to be able to age in place and age in dignity, and also ensuring that we can have an accessibility to healthcare coverage for every single Marylander.
Gentlemen, I want to get your closing statements in. I'll let you answer this question, then we'll keep moving.
So I want to start by, first of all, pointing out that my opponent is, just to be able to rebut the statement about gasoline cars, he is on board with, and he even said it, changing the electric grid to allow for electric cars. And it's not just the allowance of it. We have a 2035 plan that he supports to tie us similarly to California, which has a plan to ban gasoline cars. That's a problem. It's not going to work for our small businesses.
Our plan doesn't have that.
And when my opponent says he wants to leave no one behind, well, unfortunately, as a CEO of Robinhood, a nonprofit that's supposed to
pivot,
he left Baltimore behind while he was making millions. And he's currently living in a $3 million home while he leaves Baltimore and the rest of the state behind. Now,
oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I got to pause this real quick. I got to pause this. I'll go back a little bit. The irony of him being like, he left Maryland behind. Dan Cox, for most of his life, has lived in rural Maryland, not Baltimore. Oh my gosh! He currently lives. I'm sorry. What I gotta pause this. I remember. I gotta pause this. I remember visiting his house when he built it. The irony had him built for him. He left Maryland behind. It's massive. Dan Cox. It's very big. He moved into a Maryland, not Baltimore. Fairly not rich. He currently lives in rural. What I would qualify. I remember. And I know where he lives. I remember visiting his house when he built it. I remember the locals kind of joking about what it looked like. It's massive. It's very big. He moved into a on a hill in fairly not very rural part of Maryland, and built a mansion. I remember the locals kind of joking about what it looked like. It looked like he was like, I'm gonna put this thing on a hill and
I was gonna just wrap it up.
Very.
I had 16 seconds left on the clock.
Ostentatious.
Well, that was actually my time, but
I find that
for the question
hilarious.
So I would object.
Should have answered the question.
I think that the health disparities are clear. I'm a Medicaid supporter. I will provide community health clinics. We'll work to expand our health care across the state.
We got to move, sir. Mr. Moore, closing statement, please.
Thank you so much. We've spent the last hour hearing how my opponent's dangerous and divisive
should have answered the question.
Would restrict abortion access.
Oh my gosh.
You'll get a closing statement.
But I was told I was supposed to go first because he went first. That's all. That was the rules.
Yeah. Mr. Cox, if you'd like to go first, go right ahead.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Well,
oh my gosh. That looks terribly optic-wise for Cox. He looks like a oh my gosh, petulant, complaining child, and Moore looks like the adult that's like, you go ahead. Don't throw a fit. Here you go.
It is an honor and privilege to be your next governor if I earn your vote. And
that looks terribly optic-wise for Cox. He looks like a petulant, complaining child, and Moore looks like the adult that's like,
of crime
you go ahead.
But in the world.
Don't throw a fit. Here you go.
Wants to defund the police. He wants to, quote, indict the system. I will stand against that.
Didn't earn mine.
It will be the only balance possible. Because a one-party rule is not the way of the future of Maryland. We have to have an opportunity for safety, for affordability of housing. I will lower property tax assessment valuations so we can cut those rents and cut those taxation. I will make sure that we have freedom once again where you choose your health care with your doctor, and education must be world-class. We're going to end the indoctrination. We're going to end the politicalization of our classrooms. We're going to make sure teachers are empowered and parents are back in charge. I am humbly asking for your vote. Thank you for the opportunity. You can go to coxforfreedom.com and sign up to help.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you. We have spent the last hour hearing about how my opponent's dangerous and divisive views would restrict abortion access and his economic plans would move Maryland backwards. So you can see we have very different views on policies, but we also have very different values. You know, my opponent likes to throw around the word freedom, but freedom is not an empty word to me. My life could have gone a very different way after my dad died. I could have been left behind. But I'm running for governor because we can do better. As a state, we can get these deadly illegal guns off of our street. We can build an economy that lifts everyone up. We can protect abortion access. I've spent my entire career bringing people together to make our country, our state, and our communities better, and that's what real patriotism looks like. And I'd be honored to have your support as we move Maryland forward in this next decade.
All right, gentlemen.
There you go. There is the debate. Oh my gosh, there was one thing that I forgot to bring up in the climate discussion. Let's give me 1 second. There you go. There is Dan posted this on his Facebook. Debate. Oh my gosh, there was one thing that I forgot to bring up in the climate. The Earth's climate has always changed, and there is no amount of taxes or government that can change it. Government is not God. The Green New Deal by AOC is just another communist manifesto. It should be burned along with all these masks we are forced to wear. The Earth's climate has always changed, and there is no amount of taxes or government that can change it. Government is not God. The Green New Deal by AOC is just another communist manifesto. Those it should be burned along with all these masks we are forced to wear. I find it really humorous. Rational. Rational humans we're dealing with here. Grift. And it is a grift. Lord. It is full. Yeah, those are the Maryland does choices. Not care about I find what it really work for Maryland. Humorous. He cares about what benefits him the most. Grift. And it has been humorous to watch him do this whole full-on MAGA Trumpy grift for a while. He does not care when he originally was about what very opposed to Trump. To the point where he was reposting articles what benefits comparing him to Hitler, literal Hitler. It's been humorous to watch him do this. I called him out on that once he started supporting Trump, which was what led me to when he originally was very opposed to Trump. But to the point where he was reposting articles that grift for a while, comparing him to Hitler, it's really literal Hitler. It's recently come up. He deleted that where because of Trump's. I called him out on that once he started supporting Trump, which was what led me to is distancing himself and all that from. But he played that grift for a while, and now it's really amusing to me. Washington Post about how where because of Trump's current problems, it seems like which was he is a social media platform known as an online hub for white speech and white nationalists. His campaign website no longer notes his fight against certifying the 2020 about the Washington Post about how Dan Cox deleted more than 1,000 accounts. Striking his profile from the site, which welcomes a social media platform known as an online hub for white speech and white nationalists. A web archive page of the campaign website no longer notes any of the posts himself certifying campaign the 2020 presidential election results. Let's see, the scrubbing of his Gab account and website deleted more than 1,000 posts, which recently brought in out-of-state staff from the site, which welcomes users to reset the platform's primary contest against a moderate Republican. A web archive page in a race seen as many as approximately any of the posts themselves and Cox campaign who endorsed Kelly Schultz and former President Donald Trump who backed Cox. Let's see, the scrubbing of his Gab account deleted and revamped other elements of its website after winning the state primary, including references to a natural right gun ownership, and promises to ban transgender athletes in women's sports and conduct endorse Kelly Schultz and former presidential election, which he called the Cox campaign deleted and revamped other elements of some of the website after winning the July primary, including references to a natural right to gun ownership across the country, and promises to ban transgender athletes in women's sports and conduct an audit of the 2020 presidential election, which he called changed Cox's pivot away from some of the policies he championed are emblematic of the broader challenges primary. The Cox campaign removed in swing states across the country. This sentence from the Meet Dan Cox section of his website. As one of President Trump's volunteer lawyers in Philadelphia during the 2020 election and in the Maryland State House, he has led the fight for election integrity. Sometime after the primary, the Cox campaign removed the landing page before the primary vowed to conduct a forensic audit section of the election. As no mention President Trump's is currently volunteer lawyers in Philadelphia during the 2020 election and in the Maryland State House, he has led the fight for very clearly. Trying to do that, and then it was written again today. The landing page before the primary vowed to conduct a forensic audit fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago. No mention of an audit is currently on the page. I believe it was Sunday or Monday. Yeah, he had very clearly this fundraiser where that, and then it was written again. Paid $1,776 to get in, had and all that fundraiser. And then you could pay I think it was $25,000 over the weekend. To get a picture with Sunday or Monday and Donald Trump, which I don't know how how that would work with the Maryland election law. You paid $1,776 to get in, and all that, and then you could pay, I think it was $25,000.
Regardless, he had this big event with Trump
to get a picture with Dan Cox and Donald Trump, which I don't know how, like,
his daughter did,
how that would work with a Maryland
but he
election.
has in law.
He can only get $6,000 per individual.
It's noticeably
I don't know how
weird
that would work. That he seems to now,
but
now that the grift,
regardless, he had this
he's
big
gotten
event
all
with
that he
Trump,
can out of that
and
grift. He hasn't even posted about it on his
at all.
social.
His daughter did.
He's
but he
completely
hasn't.
like, and it's
Just let that not
it's weird.
happen.
It's noticeably weird that he seems to now.
Yeah.
Now that the grift has, he's gotten all that he can out of that grift.
He hasn't even posted about it on his social.
He's a grifter, and I'm sure as soon as Trump completely falls out of favor, if he does whatever's popular with the Republican Party at the moment, he will do that. So yeah, that's pretty much my look at the gubernatorial debate. That's him.
He's